Hi everyone, so happy Christmas. I know for most people watching this is going to be actually Boxing Day or later, although for some of my American, Canadian and South American viewers, of course, today is actually Christmas Day for you. So happy Christmas and I hope you have a great new year. Now we're often more thoughtful, let's say, towards the end of the year. We often reflect on how our year has been, and I think it's a great thing for people every quarter, but especially every year, to really reflect on your year. And I think Warren Buffett once said, it's always great to spend time to think, even on a weekly or a monthly basis, and not just work hard, but also think hard. So I've been doing some reflections on my year, and hopefully some of my reflections could help some of you guys as well, regardless where you have your own business or just in your career or whatever. Hopefully a percentage of these reflections could help you as well. So let's start with number one. Now, number one is I've realized how important being selective is. Now, I've always understood, at least for the last 10, 15 years, that being selective is very important. However, that isn't just a case of being selective with who you associate with. It's also a case of in business. So, for example, at the start of the year in January, my account minimums were $200 on the regular savings side and $30,000 on the lump sums. But they have gradually gone up now to $75,000 and $600 on the regular account. And that's for many reasons. Mainly it's because the demand from clients has been too high. So obviously I've had to increase the minimums, even though idealistically I want to help people also with less money. But it's also a reality. For some reason, people are actually easier to deal with if they have more. Now, when I was younger and growing up, I often assumed, really, like most people do, if somebody had a lot of money, they'd be kind of arrogant, they'd be rude, they'd be hard to deal with. We all think of those kind of customers in business class or whatever being arrogant or whatever. But in reality, actually, most of my clients who have more are actually much easier to deal with than those who have less. And it's not just me. I was talking to a gentleman who's been in finance for 30 years. He was saying the same thing. It's often the smaller clients who give the most headache. So even though I was trying to be, I wouldn't say idealistic, but I would say trying to be reasonable, trying to help people on all ends of the income spectrum, I just found it was too difficult to help some people at the lower end. That doesn't mean that everyone at the lower end was super demanding or, really difficult to deal with. But in general, people who have more, ironically, are also more trusting. In other words, a CEO or country manager for, I don't know, China or Singapore, whatever, an expat or someone who's in a good position, they've seen enough of life to actually know that actually most people out there in business are fairly good. Whereas the ironic thing is many 23, 24, 25-year-olds who are just getting started, for some reason, I don't know if it's the education system or it's their parents telling them it's better to be safe than sorry, but they can actually be more untrusting than, say, a 55, 60-year-old person who's got more money. That doesn't mean I don't have clients still who are young. I have clients from their 20s to their 70s. I'm just talking, of course, in general. There are always exceptions to the rule. Those people who have less who are very trusting, those who have more who are less trusting. The point is, it might seem counterintuitive to you because we often assume young people are more idealistic, more trusting, but actually that isn't always the case. And the same thing when it comes to people with less. Sometimes they're actually more untrusting. So I've actually increased my account minimums. I do expect to keep increasing them gradually over a period of time, but I don't just want to deal with people who are ultra high net wealth or high net wealth. I do want to keep my account minimums reasonable, at least, where people can sign up from different countries, different demographics, different income distributions. But I want to have that balance between not making them too high, but also avoiding some of the kind of the problems that happened, especially a few years ago. Now, linked to that is breaking industry norms. Now, I've talked about this on many of my videos, but I've really realized more this year how important that is. So my best performing staff member came from a freelancer website. That's completely against the industry norms in my industry. Most of my best results have came from breaking industry norms. So I started to realize how important this was 1 or 2 years ago, but I think this year I've really realized it's important to break industry and social norms as much as possible. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you just break an industry norm and you expect it to monetize overnight, you might have to try 100 ideas, and only 10 of them will work. But if you make sure your ideas are a little bit controversial or aren't widely used, you are more likely to get traction if you do what everybody else is doing, right? It's natural, right? But human nature, it's called normalcy bias, I think psychologists call it. Human nature is actually reassured by what's normal. But if you do what everyone else does, at the end of the day, you can only outwork them, outsmart them. It's not easy, right? Whereas if you break industry norms and work hard and work smart, you've got a much better chance of success. Now, number 3 is making it easier for people to reach out to me. Now, previously, I'm not saying it was incredibly difficult for people to reach out to me. I had a contact me button on my website and whatever. But since I've had the chat function on my website, the live chat function, although I'm not always online, sometimes people just leave their email to me, the number of people who have reached out to me has gone up by pretty much 8 to 10 times. That doesn't mean that hasn't ever caused problems. Like, obviously some people who reach out are serious, some people are just curious or whatever, but you get my point. It's part of human nature, the path of least resistance. If you make it easier for someone to do something, they're more likely to do it. So that's something I've really learned in 2020. I mean, again, I did realize this was important even 1 or 2 years ago. I've been trying to simplify what I do more and more. So going back 5 years ago, I would have the old-fashioned paper application forms, right? That's clearly a nonsense in 2019, and I've been gradually simplifying things. But it only took me a few minutes of thinking about this carefully, and I thought, well, hold on, I'm making it easier for people to actually do the paperwork to make the investment, in other words, to sign up. Why don't I make it easier for people to reach out to me in the first place? So since putting my contact details online more obviously, having a chat function, more people have reached out to me. So that's a key lesson. Always make it easier for someone to do something. You could have the best service, the best product in the world, but you know what? If you make it too difficult for someone to reach out to you, less people are going to do it. It's like if you're going to celebrate Christmas tonight and you say to your friends, I tell you what, there's a bar or restaurant next door. Shall we go? More people are going to go than if you say, I tell you what, let's have a 40-minute walk. It's common sense. Socially, in business, make it easy for someone to do something and more people will do it, right? And in 2020, I really want to make it easier and easier for clients to do things, whether that's see their valuations on my website directly. I'm always looking to make it simpler for you guys rather than more difficult. 'Cause let's face it, I mean, we live in a time when everyone's busy. Our concentration spans are less than before. So as time goes on in the 2020s, this is going to become more and more important as time goes on. Now, number 4, though, is I've learned something else, and that's that at an early stage in business, it makes sense to rely on free techniques. But later on, often you need to reinvest back in the business. Now, what do I mean by that? Imagine you've got a new website today, like literally you make your website live today. Now, at the end of the day, your website or your business, if you just rely on free techniques, that can be more effective than paid techniques. Because if you think about it, if you spend a fortune on Google ads or Facebook ads or loads of processes, you haven't even got anyone on your website yet. So it often doesn't make sense just to throw money at a problem when you're just getting started. However, once you reach a certain stage, you often need to reinvest back. I mean, I'll give you an example. Earlier on, I said how the number of people reaching out to me has gone up by 10 times, mainly because of the chat bot or the chat function where people can reach out directly to me more easily to me. However, that means I've got 10 times more people to email or WhatsApp or whatever. So what does that mean? I had to invest in some processes, right? And that's the thing. Once you get to a certain stage, a certain level, so my website now gets, I think I was looking, gets about 63,000 views a month, almost 1 million a year, about, what's that, 680,000 or something like that. Obviously, at that kind of level, you need more infrastructure, whether that's security infrastructure, whether that's some kind of systems or whatever. That doesn't mean you need to spend a fortune on those kind of things, but it does mean you should start to spend more money on the business. Whereas at the early stages, often free techniques are the best techniques, but then, build it up. And eventually you'll become let's say, a victim of your own success, and then you need to use technology, because at the end of the day, we only have 24 hours in a day. So if you just rely on free stuff, eventually you'll reach a plateau, right? And to get to that next level where you're 5 times, 10 times, you actually need to reinvest back into processes. So another example, if your website's getting 1 million views a year, if you want to get to 10 million views a year, realistically, are you just going to be able to post 2 times more, 10 times more onto social media? Of course not. You're going to need either more staff, more technology, more paid stuff. But if your website's only getting like 100 views a year, like 10 views a month, you need to actually build it up first before you actually reinvest back into the business. So reinvesting back into a business is key, but do it sensibly and don't do it at the start. Build it up first and then reinvest back into a business. Now, linked to that though, there is a, let's say, a balance between procedure and speed. As I said before, one thing I've really learned more and more is people want things quickly now. So there's no point having more procedures if those procedures are going to slow things down. Like if one of you guys reached out to me and it took me 10 days to respond, unless I had an automated message which says, look, I'm on holiday now, I can't get back to you. Of course, 10 days is too much, right? So procedures have got to be still speedy. You don't want bureaucratic procedures. You just want procedures that make things more speedy, if possible, right? Now, number 6 is I've learned that younger people who haven't been in an industry for too long do tend to adapt better, again, as a generalization, than older people. Now, by younger people, I don't necessarily mean people who are 21 just out of university. And there are some older people who adapt very quickly. But it's back to the industry norms thing indirectly. Somebody who's been in an industry for 30 years, 35 years, especially if they've done relatively well, are much less likely to be flexible than somebody who's only spent a few years in an industry or indeed is completely new to an industry. So let's say you want to hire a marketing expert or a HR expert or whatever. Don't necessarily assume it's a bad thing to hire somebody with no industry experience, because as long as they've got transferable skills, you can often, it's a blank canvas, if you like, but they've already got more skills than a graduate. Whereas somebody who's been in an industry for a long time, they've often got all these things in their mind about what works, what doesn't. They often haven't adapted themselves to the time. So often hiring people who have no industry experience, if you have your own business, can work better because they're more likely to break industry norms. They're more likely to have fresh ideas. They're more likely to adapt themselves. Now, number 7 is about actually the stock market. So we started this year with markets down about 25%. If you remember right, last December, January, the US markets fell quite a lot. Now, at the end of this year, markets are up by about 30%. Most people expect them to go up next year. But you know what? You don't really hear much about it. It once again shows that fear is a much bigger emotion than greed. And now, whenever the markets go down, it's the front pages of the newspaper. It's the top story sometimes on the BBC or the Guardian or whatever. When markets are going up like this, it's kind of mentioned, oh yeah, the S&P 500 is hitting our record high, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? People never learn their lesson. In other words, hardly anyone this year predicted that the markets would go up higher. I said, just don't worry, just stay the course. I never make predictions exactly about what's going to happen to the markets in the short term. But the funny thing is, next year, if I'm going to make one prediction, is that a lot of people are going to say things like, oh, should I not invest in the S&P because look at the 2020 election. People don't seem to learn their lessons from the past. So whether it is 2016 when markets unexpectedly went up under Trump, or Brexit when they briefly went down and then went up, or indeed this year where they've unexpectedly gone up, other years they've unexpectedly gone down, people don't seem to get it that you can't actually predict markets and elections and things like that. So some people do eventually realize, hold on, I've been trying to predict these things for 10 years. It hasn't done my finances any good. Maybe I should just invest now and just ride the good and the bad. A lot of people just, it's almost like it's part of human nature to assume we can predict the future. It's almost like a part of egoism, which is definitely a part of human nature. Okay, linked to that, number 8 is that this decade, the 2010s, has actually changed a lot of things. Now, if you think back to the early 2000s, mid 2000s, 2010, even though the internet had existed for a long time, by say the year 2000, most people were still only using computers for Excel, Word and whatever, and we still had those awful, slow internet connections. I'm sure a lot of you people can, as well, just like me, remember those times when you had to wait literally like an hour for some things to load. Now, maybe some of the younger viewers are amazed by that. Some of the 18-year-olds could never imagine watching this. You'd have to wait so long. But it was really the case that even 19, 20 years ago, internet was very slow. But here's the interesting thing. Even 10 years ago, many countries were just going to that stage where they were going on to the fast internet. So even eBay, Amazon, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, people didn't trust them like now. People weren't doing everything online now. If you would have told people 10 years ago that you would trust a complete stranger to take your daughter or son on a taxi ride because of an app like Uber compared to the traditional taxis, people would have laughed. If you would have told people that pretty much everything is going online now, including work, including hiring, like freelancer websites, everything, whether it's low trust products, high trust products, people would have thought it's crazy. What? I mean, you're going to hire a lawyer online? Are you going to hire a tax advisor online? The fact is the last 10 years have been really revolutionary in terms of how people shop and buy. And I think that's only going to increase in the next 5 or 10 years. I think in the next 5 or 10 years, the majority of all business, whether it's low trust, high trust, will go online. Obviously, there will be exceptions. You can't see a doctor online. You can maybe have basic advice online, but sometimes the doctor would actually have to see you physically. But I think the amount of business that will be physical will go down and down and down. I mean, I can remember when I was first in the finance industry, most people wanted face-to-face advice. Now, in general, they don't want it because they feel like it takes too much time. Maybe there'll be too much pressure, or for whatever reason, we're used to doing things online now, and that will just continue as time goes on. Now, another thing though, is I've also learned though, it's very hard to change people. In other words, I said before that younger people in general adapt more than older people. And that's true as a broad generalization, even though people in general find it harder to adapt. But I've had so many people I've hired this year who have said to me, look, Adam, what I'm doing is not working. It used to work 5, 10, 15 years ago. I want some fresh ideas about how to, I don't know, improve and so on. But the reality is most people, even if you tell them exactly how you have succeeded, most people are not willing to put in the work and the effort. In other words, let's say you say to someone, let's say 20, 30 years ago, oh, look, I've made a fortune from doing 200 cold calls a day. Of course, most people are not going to have the guts, right, to do 200 cold calls a day and be told to get lost by loads of people. But likewise, in the modern era, when you don't need to use techniques like cold calling, but if you say to someone, look, I've done this by doing this, you'd be amazed at how many people, though, will not do it consistently. So if you say to people, I'll just give you one example, right? It's a fact that 3,000 word articles rank higher on Google. So for organic Google search, if you want higher organic Google search, in general, you need to do things like 3,000 word articles, put pictures up, and there's many things you can do to actually increase the chances that you will rank on Google. But if you say that to somebody, most people won't put even one article on their blog, never mind do it every single week, because they're not willing to put in the work, or they're not used to it. They don't feel comfortable adapting themselves. So I've learned that it's much harder to actually train someone and change the way someone does it than just changing yourself. Now remember, you can only change yourself. You can't change other people. You can just encourage other people. And that's very difficult from a business owner's perspective. Because as a business owner, you want to control everything and you almost feel emotional if you're paying people something. But at the end of the day, you can't change people. And finally, it has to be said, you can't be popular for people. The more success you get, the more traction you get, you will have more people who love what you do, but also more people who hate what you do, right? I can't think of think of any celebrity, right, in the world who's known by millions of people. I think all of them get hate mail, right? Even the nicest people amongst them. Same with world leaders or whatever. Obviously, it's to different extents. Now, with the internet, and of course, from what I'm doing, look, obviously, I'm not getting like 100 million people a month on my website, but still, from all the millions of views I get on Q&A websites or on my personal website, of course there's never going to be such a situation where everyone likes what you're doing. So really, if you're a business owner, you have to put yourself out there, but by the same token, you have to always take it with a pinch of salt, right? There could be people watching this content who are maybe drunk, or some people taking it seriously, some people who are not taking it seriously. There's always going to be trolls. You know what I mean? Never take it personally. So for example, if I got a hate mail or a hateful comment from this video, all I would do is I would just delete the comment. I would block the person. I wouldn't give a damn about it, because that's the only way you can be. Because at the end of the day, there's some hateful people out there, but that should never affect you personally and how you think about yourself. And at the end of the day, if you weren't getting success, you wouldn't have those hateful comments. I think I've never once heard a blog owner or a business owner who's getting very little traction say, oh, you know what, I get loads of hate mail. It just doesn't exist, right? So always realize that if you get more kind of hateful comments as well as positive comments, actually that can be a good sign, right? And deep down, nobody really cares. So have a great new year, everyone. There's going to be really exciting things coming up next year. I'm working on things that are going to make your life easier and so on, more ways of getting in contact with you, maybe more applications. I'm working on an app for my website and so many exciting things. So have a great new year, and I'm sure we'll see each other next year.